My name is Theo Brown, and I am a professor at the University of Reading. My main body of work over my academic career has been concerned with the study of folkloristics and supernatural phenomena. I'm keeping these notes because the university will no longer support funding for my research, and I'm afraid that all my studies will eventually be lost. With my last scraps of funding, I am taking on a final research project. I will be conducting a study into the vast range of folklore in Devon, travelling to various sites and attempting to document with my camera the landscapes that these myths occupy. Growing up in Devon as a child, the passion for my research began in these ancient places, and now, returning home over 5 decades later, after exploring hundreds of ancient mythologies around the globe, I feel as if I have now turned full circle, and that somehow I am coming to the end of something. Devon, like Cornwall, suffers from its popularity. Everyone is aware of its commercial attractions, its beach resorts, its cream teas, as well as its commercial folklore. Its PIXIES, its hounds of the Baskervilles, its pirate coves. Such romantic items, even when misunderstood or invented, are sufficient for most people, and therefore the more important and more interesting things are overlooked. Devon's red earth varies in hue, from a mellow sienna round Exeter to a fierce blood colour beyond Dartmouth. When I was a boy, my schoolmistress told me the land is actually formed from the body of a giant that lay down and died there. According to Geoffrey of Monmouth, giants were aboriginal inhabitants of Albion. Albion, the ancient name given to Great Britain in the 1st century AD. And according to him, these creatures were mostly clustered in the West Country. And strangely, to Totnes in South Devon, Monmouth also attributed the most important etiological myth of the Middle Ages. Brutus, the eponymous conqueror of Britain, was really a Trojan, and the goddess Diana told him to carve out a place for himself in underdeveloped Albion. He landed somewhere on the coast of Totnes, either Torbay perhaps, or, as the inhabitants of Totnes claim, he came up the River Dart and stepped off onto a granite rock and declaimed, "Here I am, and here I rest, and this town shall be called Totnes." The giants were slaughtered, but their leader, Goegamot, fled to Dartmoor and was dragged out of a bog and presented to Corineus, another Trojan warrior. Upon being presented to Corineus, a wrestling match was started between Goegamot and the Trojan warrior on a cliff edge. Goegamot was defeated and thrown over into the waves, causing his blood to redden the sea permanently, as indeed anyone can see just beyond Dartmouth. The granite rocks of Dartmoor are said to owe their split condition to the moment of the crucifixion earthquake, a belief found in many other parts. Some stones in Devon turn at midday, including the Dartmoor stone circles and the 9 maidens at Bellstone. There is a legend of Blackenstone Rock. The rock stands on a ridge at the edge of the moor and is a landmark visible at a great distance. South of it is a hamlet called Brennan. From it one day, a young wife set out for Morton Fair, leaving her young baby in the back garden. As she walked, 3 ravens flew down from the direction of Blackenstone Rock. She hailed them idly as they passed her. "Where be you going to, ravens cruel?" And they answered, "Up to Brennan, up to Brennan." She continued, unperturbed, and 2 more formations of 3 ravens swooped past her, repeating the same formula. Late in the evening, she returned home, and to her horror found the baby had vanished. And eventually, after several days searching, they found the baby. The ravens had carried it to the summit of the rock and picked it to the bone. There are several folk memories of women arraying themselves in red cloaks and, armed with broomsticks, lining up on the cliffs to convince the incoming fleets that the army was waiting for them. Until the present century, the term witch traditionally applied to three kinds of practitioners. The Black Witch worked harm to man and beast, and by holding this power over her hard-working neighbours, extorted from them eggs, firing, etc. The White Witch healed by the combination of her powers with a charm. But there was also the third type, the Grey Witch, feared above all, since her powers were ambivalent, and she could deal out good or ill, and overlook or release according to her whim. In the mid-1980s, when I was living in London, I used to spend much of my time researching in the British Library, in their newspaper collection archive at Colindale. I often remember glancing up from my solitary desk late at night to see the old caretaker staring back at me. She had the palest blue eyes, and she would regularly stare at me in a puzzled way before disappearing between the library's aisles. Years later, when the old woman had passed away, a friend from the library came up to me and said, "Did you know you've got a ghost that follows you around?" I said, "No, what's it like?" "It's an old little woman in black. The caretaker told me once that you often came into the library just as it was getting dark, and there was this little dark figure always behind you." I asked if it ever followed me out of the library. She replied, "No. When you went out, it used to wander off into one of the bays and lose itself." Victorian books have rather misled people about pixies. It has never been usual to see them, but some people see them sometimes, and not necessarily country folk. However, people bred on the land once had an instinct that there was someone in nature who should be remembered. As late as the 1930s at least, haymakers in North Devon would remember to throw a crumb or two of their lunch and a drop of their cider onto the ground. A friend I went to school with used to tell me rather excitedly that she had found her horse's manes tangled by pixie riders overnight. When we deal with these strange situations, we cannot for a moment forget that we are the most alien thing on earth, and the thing which is most at home in it is nature herself. So always there is this nagging terror of slipping back, of reversion, always the quick glance back over the shoulder, and then the hasty reformulating of ever more exalted ideals of hygiene, more machines, more chemicals, to down the forces of nature. Or if these are running short and creating too much devastation here, we can now turn to space travel for fresh fields to ruin and space monsters to farm. Myself, this Earth is good enough for me. A significant number of hilltop chapels are dedicated to St. Michael. They occur on isolated hills from Glastonbury Tor in Somerset to Rough Tor on the Bodmin Moors. St. Michael was held to be especially potent against thunderstorms. Brentor was the scene of a great conflict between the archangel and the devil. It seems that hilltops were points of contact with the other world, obviously upwards towards the sky, but also downwards into the underworld. So the chapel was designed to seal the entrance. A deep sense of having come from nature permeates all the cosmos of the superstitious. The earth is the mother of all things, and is herself pregnant with life, natural and supernatural. In death, there is always a fear of reversion back to nature. If we do something unlawful or presumptuous, we go right back to stone in a flash. In being turned back to nature, we are replaced and ultimately forgotten. That is, in my view, man's greatest fear. Our folklore and mythology, bound to the land by our ancestors, allows us to live on in the passing of time and the regeneration of nature.